Hey guys, it's Keegan. Welcome to the third video in my Trauma Tarot series. There will be 8 of these videos when I'm done. And depending on when you find this video, they might all be completed, or if you're watching them as I'm releasing them, there are 2 others that I've filmed, and I'll put links to all the videos in the description box below in case you want to check them out and see what other topics I've covered. This one feels like it might be pretty intense. I've done a lot of work before sitting down to record, and I wanted to talk to you guys specifically about what I've done. And then I have something to ask of you, the people who are listening to me, just to help with this particular video. So before I sat down, I made a very clear intention here that whatever is revealed, whatever is talked about in this reading, that it stays protected and shielded from anyone finding out about it that doesn't necessarily need to find out. I've also asked that for the people who are listening to this reading, that their energy be shielded from the person that they are involved with, the person with who they might have trauma bonds, so as to not alert that person through any sort of energetic interference that this is even a conversation that we're having together. What I need to ask you guys is a favor before I start flipping cards, and that is to take a moment, if you're listening to me, just to send healing, protective energy to the other people who will click on this video to watch it. So in case you just clicked on this because the thumbnail or the title spoke to you, or you just had like an energetic nudge to watch it and you don't quite understand what trauma bonds are, I want to talk a little bit about that before I start shuffling. In its simplest form, a trauma bond occurs when we are mistreated or abused in some way, and then the person comes back with some sort of reinforcement to prevent us from actually leaving. It's caused by a cycle of behavior. So in a very simplistic way of trying to explain this, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So if you want a more in-depth explanation, there are tons of licensed professionals who talk about this as well. But if things were always bad, if every single moment of every single day was horrible, we'd probably do something to change the reality of what we're experiencing. Trauma bonds occur when it's a cycle of abuse, mistreatment, met with, followed by some sort of praise, some sort of gift, some sort of promise, some sort of shift in behavior. If you are someone who feels like you are in a relationship where the person that you're with has 2 different types of personalities, a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of situation, if you feel like you get glimpses of the person that you love, but most of the time you are dealing with someone who you don't even recognize, it's quite possible that you have trauma bonds. You may or may not be aware of them, but they keep you locked into the pattern of abuse. So with that said, I am starting to tune into people. I think a lot of people clicked away because that was a little bit too heavy for them. So if you're still listening to me, congratulations on just being able to take the first step in becoming aware of what's really truly going on. Okay, so I'm going to start shuffling and then I will flip cards out. I have about a dozen decks in front of me here. This will be pretty rapid pace. I will be using the cards, the illustrations on the cards, my own intuitive insights that come through to deliver messages to you that you need to hear to begin the process of dealing with this connection. Okay. Immediately, most of the cards are hidden from me. I can't see them. The only card that I can see is this Ace of Cups. I think a lot of you are coming through initially with what feels almost like resistance to me. You want this to be something that is ultimately going to work out. You want this to be a connection where it flips And instead of there being more bad days than good, you have hope. You're holding out for hope that eventually that will flip and there will be more good days than there are bad. The other two cards that were hidden from me, however, we have the Ace of Pentacles coming out reversed with the Page of Swords upright. Truthful communication about this connection will reveal that there isn't a lot of stability in this. There isn't the potential for something to be built over time. This is something that feels to me very unstable. I sense that there is an aspect to this connection I'm going to hold this card this way for you guys. Six of Pentacles coming out on its side here. One thing that I want you to ask yourself is, are you being given the same amount of effort that you are giving to the other person? Are your needs being addressed? Are your feelings being honored? Are your pain points acknowledged, believed? Or is it only you who is acknowledging the other person's feelings, the other person's needs, the other person's hurt? This card would indicate that this is not something that is fair and equal. This feels very much like a connection in which you are putting in most of the work. When you say you're upset, when you say that you need certain things, my throat is literally starting to close up. There's no space here for you and your needs. And everything is centered and focused around this other person. I want to show you these two cards. We have the Magician coming out with the World card. They're both upright. Okay. Now, with this Magician, it's not reversed here. It's showing up upright. And I think this is coming through mostly as guidance for you, the person listening to me, to listen to your intuition. The thing about the Magician is the Magician utilizes intuition, desire. They're able to look inward and think, what are the things that I want? What are the things that I need? What would make me happy? What would make me feel safe? What would make me feel fulfilled? And then they utilize their intuition. They utilize their own abilities to vision what it is that they want to connect themselves to it. If you're spending most of your time thinking about all of the things that you want to change about this connection does not match what it is that you want. But it's tricky because if you're bonded to the person who is actively mistreating you, if you're bonded to the person, it's hard to break away from it. But the World card coming out here, which speaks to a need for something to close out, for cycles to come to a close. If you are someone who grew up in neglectful or abusive environments, situations, you may be carrying a pattern with you, a pattern which for some of you actually extends beyond you and your parents. It's something that your parents had with their parents, and they had with their parents. It's a generational trauma that's just been passed forward through behaviors. What you see, what you grow up in, you just assume that that is something that is normal. You assume that that is something that everyone has gone through. And until you realize that there might have been things that happened during your childhood that were just not okay. Even if they don't compare to what you know other people might have gone through in their childhoods. If a pattern was set up that you believe that someone treating you in a certain way is acceptable when it's not, it's something that you need to address. This feels very much like at least a lifelong cycle of behavior, generational for a good amount of you that are listening. I will say this reading is not as rapid as the other two were. I'm not sure if that's just because of the weight of what I'm tuning into here, or if I've just settled a little bit more into talking about these things that are a little bit more heavy. I feel like some of you are just really tired. Wow. All right, a bunch of cards coming out here. We have the King of Swords reversed, King of Cups reversed, Page of Swords reversed, Ten of Wands coming out reversed as well. Lots of reversals here in this deck. I want to talk to you guys about what I'm getting from this, okay? So in this situation, we have two of the Kings coming out reversed. So what does that mean? This represents the energy of someone who is dishonest, the energy of someone who is manipulative, the energy of someone who's focused only on themselves. This is someone who takes any sort of critique and turns it around. So it's not about them, it's about you. All of their communication is designed to deflect. And it feels almost like with this Ten of Wands, typically this Ten of Wands reversed to me, I like that card when it comes out reversed, because it means that we're realizing that there are things that we need to change, there are things that we need to shift. But what's missing here, right, is this, the World card. It's almost like you've just settled into it. You've just said, okay, well, you know what? I just have to deal with their moods. I have to deal with tiptoeing around them. I have to deal with not doing anything to upset them. I need to make sure that I'm constantly in my mind having a checklist of all the things that I've done that have upset them, made them mad, made them scream, made them yell, made them throw, like whatever your situation is, you have this thing in your mind from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed of all the things you need to try to do right and all the things you need to try not to do wrong. You just have to let that stuff go, right? I feel like you're here. You're still carrying all of that. I'm missing, there's the awareness and there's the acceptance of, okay, I know everything I need to do. I know, right? But you haven't quite had the breakthrough of, wait, this is impossible. It's impossible for me to make this person feel safe and good all the time because they don't feel safe. They don't feel good. One thing that I want to say here, I have dealt with a similar sort of situation myself. And I will say, being several years out of this, there are two things that I've come to realize that I didn't have when I was at the beginning of trying to heal from this. Number one, I have a really solid understanding of my own role in that connection. Why I was drawn to it initially, what it was about me that was highlighted as a result of that connection, and also an awareness of all of the things that had to heal in order for me to remove that bond, move forward from that specific connection, and to ensure that I didn't repeat it, that I didn't go into another relationship that had the same sort of cycle. Okay? So I gained a lot of knowledge about me. And I will say, even in the worst of relationships, those things only exist because there are two people who are willing to be in that. Okay? One might be the aggressor, one might be the victim, but they're still playing roles that allow for things to become toxic and to become abusive and to become dangerous. Okay? So not breaking out of it is also a symptom of being drawn to it, right? But the other thing that I realized is that the person who I labeled as dark, evil, abuser, etc., they have their own stuff. They have their own stuff. It could be as simple as just not wanting to deal with the things that they have to deal with, It could be as complicated as actually having a diagnosable personality disorder. But regardless of what it is, that other person has their own stuff. And what's really important, what's coming through for me, is to make it very clear that you have responsibility for yourself. You have responsibility for yourself. If you are aware that you are scared, worried, concerned, frightened, sad, depressed, emotional, hopeless, more than you are safe, happy, laughing, enjoying things. If you have that awareness, then you owe it to yourself to try to figure out what you need to do to disengage from this. Because the other person isn't going to change. You have to change. You have to change. Right? They have their own stuff that's keeping them locked where they're at, and you can't do anything about that. They have to do something about that. You can't wish it for them. You can't hope it for them. They have to want it for themselves. Okay? So I think that's really important to keep in mind. Now let's see what else wants to come through here for you guys. Two of Cups coming out with the Ten of Swords, both upright. Just because we get a little bit of this, a little bit, here and there, every now and then, just enough to make us remember who we thought they were, just enough to assure us that things are going to be different, even though they're not, just enough to try to make us forgive, try to make us not leave. This needs to end. There's too much pain. There's too much sadness. There's too much. There's too much here that doesn't work. And you're aware of that. Like you know that. Three of Cups reversed. I'm going to show you these two cards, but I'm going to talk about them later. But you have the Death card coming out with the Six of Wands. Okay? This relationship as it is has too much pain. You've been hurt. You've been disappointed. This is not playing out the way that you hoped that it would. But you're staying in it. What do you need to do instead? You need to allow this to come to a close. You need to allow this to transform. You need to embrace an ending and realize that an ending allows for a new beginning into something else. If we allow ourselves to change and evolve and grow as a result of allowing something to change and close out when it needs to close out, we're rewarded. This is a very fortunate card. You have to realize, you have to reconnect to having hope. Not about this person, not about this relationship, about you. You have to believe that there are an abundance of people in the world who would love you, who would want to care for you, who would want to nurture you, who would want to support you, who would see the parts of you that are raw and tender because they are the source of pain. And instead of wanting to exploit those, they would want to try to help you, to nurture you, to be able to heal and to feel better. Just making that shift, that mental shift in believing that that's possible, instead of hoping and wishing and going over and over about one particular person, hoping this one particular person will change, a relationship will magically become different, ignoring the fact that You used to say, if things aren't better in a couple of months, I'm going to go. And then months became, well, if it's not better next year. And then, well, we've been together for this amount of time and now I'm in it. No, I'm not okay with that for you. Any more insight, please? We have the Nine of Wands here. Now, I want to say in this particular deck that I'm using, there's another Nine of Wands, and it's a very similar illustration, but it's just in full color. So when this Nine of Wands comes through, it represents that we're in a place where we're dealing with something, but the energy there is just not quite where it needs to be. And what this feels like to me is your willingness to prioritize yourself, to protect yourself. Okay, I'm okay with the cards that just came out here. I want to talk to you about this card a little bit more, though, okay? You have to amplify your willingness to, number one, acknowledge what it is that you actually want. Then be honest with yourself about whether or not you can get it where you're at. And then don't allow yourself internally to accept anything that doesn't align to what you want. Even if you need to outwardly pretend that you are accepting things until you have a plan, until you have something that you can actually implement to get yourself out of the situation that you're in, even if you need to go along with it, it's important that internally you have those boundaries in place. You don't allow your mind to be tricked. You don't allow the games to be played. You don't take a little nugget of kindness after weeks of unkindness and say that balances out the scales. That's good enough for what I've been through. You don't do that anymore. Okay? Now, when you do that, it puts you into the place of the Hangman. This card came out upright, and I'm glad that it did, because this means that you actually start to get a different perspective on this. You start to see things more clearly. You start to put yourself first. You start to prioritize what it is that you want. You start to map out your own journey, where you want to end up and how you're going to get there. And it's free of this burden of this connection. Those bonds begin to fall away. You start to untangle them, to disconnect. Some people call it cutting cords. Right? You start to do that internally while mapping out a plan of what you're going to do, how you're going to make this work, how you're going to get yourself to where you want to go. Five of Swords here. It creates a lot of things that you need to deal with in your mind. Because again, your instinct is going to be to feel bad about leaving this person, because they've convinced you you're the only person who gets them. You're the only person who can make them think differently. You're the only person who loves them the way that they've always wanted to be loved. You're the only person who accepts them as they are. Because you're bonded to this person, because they wanted you to be bonded to them. But it has to be a two-way street. Remember? Where is it? They're not doing that for you. They're not loving you how you've always wanted to be loved. They're not treating you how you need to be treated. They're not putting up with you the way you put up with them. It's not like that. Right? Ten of Swords making an appearance here. Remember earlier, it came out upright. When you do this process, right? You set your boundaries, you get clear about what you're going to put up with, you get clear about what you're not, you start to map out a plan, really think that through, prioritize yourself, protect yourself, put boundaries in place. You start to think about things differently, you start to untangle yourself from this person. You gain a different perspective. You go through what you need to go through. The mental anguish of realizing what you need to do, you navigate through that. Suddenly, this Ten of Swords is reversed, right? The swords are starting to fall out. You start to get lighter. You start to feel better. You start to not be as... You're not in it. You're not in the abuse. You are aware of it. You see it. When you do that, you can't stay in this anymore. You can't stay in it because you realize how bad it actually is. You realize that this connection is not what you thought it was. That doesn't mean that it's not capable for you to find that with someone. But it does mean that you have to be aware that there's a reason you drew this relationship in, drew this person in, why you were unable, for however long it's been, to remove yourself from it. And that isn't blaming you. Like I said, I've been there. It's just something that you have to figure out. It doesn't mean anything bad about you. It just means that there's something that you have to figure out about yourself. Once you do that, then it becomes clear to you what type of partner you want, what type of relationship you want, what you really need in a partner. You realize areas where you need to do work on yourself, things that you need to heal, trauma that you need to process, feelings that you need to allow to come to the surface, things that you need to close out, because those things get in the way of your ability to bond with someone in a healthy manner. It's a process. It's a process. And everyone does it at their own pace. Some people barely begin it. Some people start it and they start to feel things starting to feel better, and they really dive into it and they allow themselves to process things and move further and further and further down the road. And then eventually they're in something that's really healthy, where they're thriving and they're happy, and they look back at where they were, and it's almost like they feel like, I'm such a different person now. I'm in such a different place. So what I want to do here, I feel like this makes me happy. If nothing else, if you can just get to the place after hearing this particular reading in this video where you're aware of what's going on, you're aware of that cycle, you can detach from being involved in it and observe it, that's a great place to be, because it means you are so far, you've made so much progress. And again, I know for some of you, this is not something that you can necessarily just make it clear immediately that you are aware. You need to think about the best way of getting yourself out of this. You need to think about the best way, the safest way of being able to navigate this. I'm going to put a phone number up just in case some of you need that. And I'm going to end this reading here, because I think that what I'm sensing is that if you've made it this far into this video, there's some thinking that you need to do. There's some time that you need to spend. Some time you need to spend just thinking about things, accepting things, processing things, being honest about things, realizing things. Okay? So I'm sending you tons of healing energy, protective energy as well. Other people who watch this video sent you love, sent you light, sent you protection. Know that. Okay? Take care of yourself.